What's that? Thank you. So I'm Cammy Davis, and about a year ago, I was in the Pearl District in Portland, and I was gallery hopping. It's one of my favorite areas for galleries, and I was walking around. I tend to promote my brand as an artist by posting pictures of other artwork and visiting galleries and stuff like that. And I walked into a gallery in the Pearl District, and there was this beautiful art up on the walls, and it was poured resin, and it was all these colors and movement, and I was getting sucked into the artwork because, well, I'm an artist, I love art. So I was drooling over the artwork, and the gallery owner, who was Jennifer Pepin, came up to me and said, well, do you know what my gallery is about? And I said, no, I don't. What is your gallery about? I just walked in off the street. And she said, well, it is showing the connection between artists and mental illness. And I went, well, mental illness and artists, isn't that a given? And as she was talking to me, she started telling me her story. So Jennifer was diagnosed as bipolar, and as she was going through treatment, she was in one of her support groups one day, and she was looking around at all the amazingly creative people that were in the room. And there were artists and authors and musicians and chefs, and she said, you know, I really want to showcase the beauty that can come from a mental illness. And so the Pepin Art Gallery in the Pearl District was born. And if you're ever in Portland, I would highly suggest that you go there, the Pepin Art Gallery. And I know there's cards over on the table for that as well. And as she was talking to me, I was really quiet. I was inside of myself because I was thinking, oh my God, she's telling my story. And the thing is, I had been taught you don't talk about it. Through society and through the reactions of my parents and other people, I had learned that I stay quiet about the things that bother me. And I grew up in Brookings, Oregon, which is a little town over on the coast. And I was always told that I was sensitive and moody and emotional. One I really remember is a family member saying to me, you know, when you're enthusiastic, people gravitate towards you. But when you're down, which you often are, people don't like to be around you. And it's kind of a harsh message to give to a child because you're just kind of, you know, taught that, wow, I need to be up all the time and I need to hide it when I'm not. When I was 17, I had my first daughter, a cutest little blonde-haired baby. She had a little tuft of blonde hair, and her name was Tara. And I also got married. Really tough, you know, I don't know if I want to say life choice, but really a tough thing to happen so young. And so I kind of dropped my idea of going to college. I was in honor society and stuff. So it was a huge life change for me. And what that did to me was really took what was already an up and down in my life and just really increased it. And I remember that time in my life just being so tumultuous. And one day I thought, you know, there's got to be help for this. There's got to be someone who can kind of help me figure out how to balance the things that I'm dealing with. So I made an appointment to see a counselor. And I told my husband, 17 years old, and I told my husband, I'm going to go see a counselor. And he said, well, you should, because you're crazy. I've never forgotten that. You know, somebody that I wanted to respect and admire me saying that to me. And he did it really exaggerated, so it's stuck in my mind forever. But I canceled my counseling appointment. And when I was 32 was the blackest point in my life. Everything just progressively got worse. I just remember it being such a dark time in my life. Everything was black. I call one of the years my year of sleeping. I just had such a hard time just even opening my eyes and being able to function in the world. I had 3 daughters at this point. My daughters are definitely my happiness. Kaylee and Paigey are my other 2. And then I went through a divorce. And at this point, I was having panic attacks really often, trying to be a single mom, support my children, and you know, working in downtown Seattle, and I'm having panic attacks in the middle of the day. The thing that I deal with is that when things are getting bad is I really isolate myself, get to the point where I can't answer the phone, I can't leave the house. So the worst thing was during this really black time is that I was really isolated. So I had no support system at all. The best thing about being so isolated was when I said, I really think I need some help for this. I really think I need to see a counselor. There was nobody to judge me. There was no one to say, you're crazy. So I went and saw a counselor. And I finally started with the help that I had been craving since I was 17. And she sent me to a doctor, and I was diagnosed with severe chronic depression and anxiety. I found out that that does run in one side of my family, and I think there's probably some bipolar issues just because of how up and down everything always is. And just in the past year, I actually found out that actually runs in the same side of my family. So interesting. So I started getting the help that I needed and started learning how to navigate my way through life. And one of the things that I found was during the daytime, I worked in a stressful, well, what to me was a stressful job. It was in escrow. And at night, though, I would come home and my kids called them my projects. I was always building something, I was painting, I was creating something. Oh, and that's when I felt like myself. It's like it would recharge me to where I could go through the work day the following day. I was still having ups and downs and stuff, but I was starting to see a balance and starting to get the help that I needed. And then in 2008, I was actually a closer in escrow, a limited practice officer, and I was working closing these subprime loans that started the economy collapse. And I was like, oh no. And sure enough, I got laid off about a year and a half later, and I went, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Well, I took the opportunity to go to college like I had wanted to since I was, 17. And I started going to college, and surprisingly, I couldn't get funding to be an artist. I don't know why that is. And so I started going to college for interior design. And what I found was that I was now creating all day long. At the same time that I went to college, I started my art business. I started painting again, and I will never forget the feeling of selling my first painting. It was on my Etsy website, and I sold it for, it was like $600. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I started doing flea markets, or not flea markets, I'm sorry, farmers markets, and art festivals. And I wanted something that people, like in my situation, who loved art, if they couldn't afford to buy the big paintings, that they could buy some type of art. And so I started creating jewelry out of images of my paintings. So I started this little art business, and I started feeling a little bit of success with it and started thinking, wow, if I could just do this all the time and not have to go back to work in a job that I needed to recharge from at the end of the day, how different my life would be. 5 years ago, my parents called me. It was right when I was graduating, and they said, hey, would you move to Southern Oregon and take care of your grandma? Grandma was 93, and she fell down and broke her hip. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to leave Seattle and my kids. And they said, well, if you do, you can have the garage as your workshop, and you can have a studio, and you can work on your art business. So I finally gave in, and I moved to Seattle. And the thing is, I figured probably a year of taking care of Grandma, where I had a roof over my head, and I could build my business doing what I loved. And so I hit the Southern Oregon soil with my feet running. Like, I never slowed down. I just pushed aside the anxiety. I really figured out that by painting every day, the depression really was at bay a lot more. But the anxiety, it was kind of like an increase because I kept putting myself in these interesting positions as an artist. I started a YouTube channel. I have about 130,000 views on it. I do quite a few different videos, from tutorials to lately I've been creating music art videos that showcase how I paint to music. I started a radio show. It's called Art on the Airwaves. It's out of Ashland. And I have interesting guests on, such as Jennifer Pepin, the gallery owner that I mentioned, and artist that I mentioned. Chris Foster, he's one of the artists today. That's one of his pieces. He was one of my call-in guests. And I started uploading it as podcasts as well. So that's something that I do that I love. The focus on it is on art and the business of art. But these were all situations that I couldn't have done like maybe 10 years ago when my anxiety was out of control. I'm one of the founders of the Art Alliance of Southern Oregon. I started directing art events, and I continue with my jewelry. I do trade shows now. I have it in about 4 different states. In Eugene, you can find my jewelry at Made in Oregon. They're one of my biggest retailers of my jewelry. And then there's my art, and my art is my passion. And when I finally opened up and talked to Jennifer at her gallery that day in Portland and told her my story, it was very timid. I was like, I don't know if like that. But when I finally told her my story, she said, well, why don't you submit your work to me? Let me look at it. And down the road, she decided to feature my art in her gallery. That was just this past October. And what was really interesting was that as I was becoming more successful in my business, I had a sponsor, I had an advisor I was working with, and I was being told, don't talk about your anxiety. I was doing a video that I remember the most. It was called Overcoming Challenges for Artists and Entrepreneurs. And it was, there were 5 things I was supposed to feature. And one of them that I decided was just to talk about how many artists go to an art opening and how much anxiety that causes. Because when you put your art on the wall, it's like you're standing there naked. I mean, it's such a piece of you that you're putting up there. So I wanted to talk about that in my video, and when the sponsor and the advisor saw the video, they said, I want you to take that out. You're not going to be successful. You've been working so hard to create your brand, and you're not going to be successful if people know what you deal with. So it was kind of the same thing I had been told as a child, just be quiet about it. People will like you if you're enthusiastic all the time. And I did what they said. I took it out, but my brain was warring with it because I felt like it shouldn't detract from the strong, business-oriented artist that I am, that I have a challenge that I'm overcoming. Well, Jennifer gave me the voice, and so I agreed to be in her gallery, and I don't know if I told you this, Jim, but I was so nervous. I was so nervous for people to find out. So I was at a dinner party at close friends of mine, and I was standing with a couple of them, and I said, I'm going to be in a gallery in Portland. I'm really excited. And the focus is on mental illness and artists. And he said, I remember one of my friends, he said, well, that's so cool, Cammy, but why are you going to be in it? And this was a close friend. This is how well I hit it. I think it's interesting that me, someone who has dealt with mental illness my whole life, that my first reaction was such an awkward one, mental illness and artists, ha ha ha. But I think it's true in our society that there are things that we're just not used to talking about. I like some of the changes that are happening in our society, and as conversation starts, and I'm hoping that mental illness will be one of them, because I think there are probably other 17-year-olds out there who are really wanting help to figure out how to navigate a better life for themselves, and not just 17-year-olds, but people of all ages. So I really thank Linnea and the Cultural Forum, and of course Jennifer, for opening up this conversation. The other thing that she asked me to talk about was how art can help with mental illness. And I kind of have talked a little bit about how it helped me learn to keep my life in a balance to where I can live a normal life. I do still struggle with things on, sometimes it's a daily basis, sometimes it's not quite as often, but I really have to keep that balance, and art helps me with that. I saw just a really clear example of it fairly recently, a personal example, which was that I thought I'd have 1 year of taking care of her to build my art business, and it was 5. My grandma, I come from a line of really strong, independent women, and Grandma lived to 98. She made it to 4 hours past her 98th birthday, and I just lost her in November, so it's fairly recently. All the paintings of mine that are up on the walls today, I painted during a 2-week period. She was in hospice for 10 days. So they were painted during that period and then a few days afterwards. And I was the one that held her through hospice, and holding and helping someone that you love pass away is pretty difficult. And there were, a few times where I knew I was losing her, would probably never hear her voice again. Just stuff like that was like, oh, I don't know how to get through this. And I would just walk to my studio and put the beats on my ears. Like I said, I paint to music. So I put these beats on my ears, and music would start playing, and I came of age in the 80s, so it's probably like Def Leppard or something like that, but it doesn't matter, it was music. And grab my paintbrush and, just start painting. And sometimes it was so bad, like I was polishing that canvas. I'm like throwing paint at the canvas. Sometimes I was painting. My walls will never be the same in my studio after those 2 weeks. But there was a point where I was painting where suddenly I could breathe again. So that's my personal statement to how art can help me with my mental illness, is that when I am painting, I can breathe. So thank you. I, 'cause, 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 ' So Jennifer is here, will be here the rest of, through the opening, as will I, and Chris Foster is the other artist who is here tonight. So please feel free to ask us any questions. Their cards are over there on the table, as are mine. Feel free to ask me any questions tonight while I'm here, and then you can also email me through my website, and I would love to talk to any of you. And thank you so much, Linnea.